So, chapter 36 is Discourse 9, Pinchas, Parashat Etz Chaim, page Samach, page 60. As the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, the summary of this general mimer, or the beginning of the mimer, is that in 10 spheres there's a structure of Milo Mato. Briefly, as the theme is dissecting and understanding the structure of existence. So the structure of existence is fundamentally pnimi, an integrated energy within a container. That's the world we live in. There's letters on a page that convey ideas. There's an image that tells a story. There's musical notes that communicate music. In other words, this world is a world of energy and container that are fully integrated in a healthy structure. The human body is the best example. Faculties, each faculty tailored, fitting, in symbiotic relationship with its particular container. That's Pnimi. And in this memory, we began discussing how this, which is obviously the kav that emerges after the tzimtzum, which is a narrow thread of light, is essentially the one that threads and weaves the structure, because it has within the 10 spheres that are rooted in the 10 hidden spheres. And this mimer is discussing, and this discourse is discussing how it creates the structure itself, the spatial relationship between one entity and the other. And the definition of structure is higher and lower in Revelation, meaning Chachma, Bina, Chesed, Gvura. These are all levels of revelation. As he explains, the formula works this way. The more sublime, the more subtle, the less the container, the more the energy that flows within it. Chachma being an akuda, just a point, is the container for the greatest and most sublime form of expression. Bina, where the containers expand, a form of yesh, the energy is diminished. Midas, which is even more yesh because it's about me, what is in it for me, as he puts it, tev li, it's even less, it's a more diminished. Not that we don't need that, but it's a more diminished state. That was chapter 34. 35, 33 and 34. And 35, he carried it over that the same thing that we have in the 10 spheres, we also have in the worlds. That the dimensions in existence, in Seder Shtalshus, in the cosmic order, also are structured like the guf of the body of a person, into higher and lower. Generally, guf, reish, guf, regel. The head, the torso, the legs. In Lamaila, that is, as you put it, that's moichin, the reish, and there's midas, and there's I make my correction, biyah. There's bria, yitzir, and asiyah. Those are the worlds, which is similar to these three levels. And in direct disproportion to each other, the reish is the smallest container, the most amount of energy. The torso less, greater container, less energy, but more than the legs. And the legs is the least amount of energy, but the most amount of volume. In other words, space. And then if it concludes, that's why Yecheskel, who saw the Merkava of Yetzirah, needed a lot more elaboration than Yeshayahu, who saw the Merkava of Bria, because when you see the more intense, you need less containers. Yecheskel, more containers. And he said this is throughout all of Ishtalshalos, all the way from the bottom to the top, both Biyah Pratis, the microcosmic Biyah, Bria Tziyasiyah, and the macrocosmic. That was where he concluded chapter 35. The bottom line is that all this is to demonstrate the critical, the inherent structure to existence, and to define how that exactly takes place. And this is all in context of what the beginning of the discussion, which is that Pnimi has in it, Atzilus has in its element of Gilia Helam, that reveals the source, because it's certain closeness and certain revelation, but it also has yesh ma'ayin element because the structure compared to that which is beyond the structure is infinitely distant. Okay, so now we'll continue chapter 36, Lamed Vav. Middle of page 60, Samach. Omnam be'emes ein ze rak mitzad hakelim. Now, however, in truth, these gradations, this Milo-Mata structure, this distinction and diversity of the spheres and the worlds, is not just because of the containers. He's going back now to the theme that's been the recurrent theme from the beginning, that you have to say that the energies also have within them some subtle structure, even before they enter the containers. As we discussed at length, even in their root, in God's vision, there's already a vision of 10 spheres, not infinite. And then there's the second level, as the spheres emerge after the tzimtzum, as distinct entities, they're still amorphous, and then as they manifest in the containers, they take on even more tangible shape. But he goes back now that this structure that we've just been discussing in the last 3 chapters is not just from the containers. There is some parameters, some measurement, some identity, some way you can define parameters in the energy. In the way it transmits to radiate in each sphere. The best example, one of the examples you used before, was Shmaya V'Avtayan, the transmission of an idea, even when it's still abstract and is beyond Chesed and Gvura of Shammai and Hillel. That's not good. So even in that type of state, you just shut this. There's something there that is much more sublime. You maybe can't tell yet, but it's there. Additionally, he's saying, not just that the energy has within it, prior to its entering into the container, meaning from on its own, some type of parameters. He's saying also the parameters of the containers, the way that they will ultimately end up being their final resting place, so to speak, is also commensurate with the energy. And I think that I'm just using an example that just comes to me because it seems to me it's like so natural. When you use the precise words, when you're writing well, you're in the zone, and you're using precise words that are expressing exactly the flow of an idea, that's exactly what's happening. The energy and the words you almost can't distinguish. Now, obviously, if you separate, you see clearly, because there are times where you don't get the words. So clearly, they're two entities. But when it's really working well, the energy is like, and you even feel that satisfaction that you found the exact words to express that sentiment or that feeling or that idea. And you know very well when you don't have that word or words. So he's basically saying that the energy has within it already a medida, parameters that help it get to that point. So for the chachma bina on the energy level, and the medidas hakelim is kafi medidas ha'er. So, for example, you try to describe, let's say, a sublime scene like a sunset. You start trying to use sledgehammer words, it's not going to work. You right away see there that's not that. You find the right words, the gentle words, the delicate words, the words that evoke the feeling that we all have when we see, let's say, a sunset or other scene of beauty. The words are different words. They're not just. The words is much more fitting to the expression, the sentiment you want to convey. So, now he's explaining, spelling it out. This was just the formula. Now he's spelling it out, which means that according to the parameters and the way, what way Chochmah will manifest, that's how the container of Chochmah was crafted and fashioned. in that particular way. In order for it to receive, integrate, internalize this revelation of Chachma, etc. Similarly, other and similarly in all the other spheres. So just an example, but it's the idea. You see, this is pure Chassidus Chabad. He explains it with words that you can understand, and you got to just meditate a bit on it, and it becomes very, very clear. It's the way Eris and Kalim meet. See, we see it once they've met, so we take it for granted. We don't relate to the magnitude of what's happened here. When an energy and container work well together, we don't really appreciate what's going on until, God forbid, they don't work together well.
Dafkanet, because when you're experiencing that flow, you're less likely to analyze.
Right, exactly. And also, you won't have words. Like if someone says, "What does it feel like to be healthy?"
Yeah, right.
What does it feel like to breathe smoothly? You can't. If you feel something, you need a doctor. The whole feeling. You could just say, if it feels like anything, it's not a good sign. Someone says, "I feel something," that means there's a block, there's an impediment. No, but the consciousness of it, consciousness itself is limited experience, obviously, because you're like an observer. It's no longer object and subject have not melded into one, fused. For Inyan now he's going to explain. And what the Inyan in this commission is Barleil Peireches, like we discussed earlier, chapter 8. Demisavus ha'er nasa keli. Okay, he's tying that together now. So there was the concept, Misavus ha'er nasa keli, from the thickness. Av is thick, grub. From the Asavus ha'er, the thickness, you can say the particles that are in the air, in the energy, nasa keli. That's how the keli was shaped, was formed. So I'll just reiterate what he said earlier there. It's from Etz Chaim. And the importance of it is vital in the interface. Remember, it's all interface. Because at the end of the day, you can have the energy and container meet, but there's so much more unity and union when each of them had something of the other beforehand. Or else, in some way, it's still forced. So what we say is like this. Obviously, everything originates in Atzmus. So there's a koyach ha'achdus, and no matter what's going to come into existence, no matter how diverse the multitudes will be, every piece has in it somewhat from the others, which is pure modern physics today. We know this as a fact. It's been demonstrated. So everything has from the others, but that doesn't mean it is the other. There is diversity. So when the koyach ha'gvul, the yichelis, the God's power to create gvul, or let's say his vision of which particular 10 spheres, it has within it also the bligvul, as we've spoken, the residue, the impression, the reshima, the different things that he spoke about, how that gvul still retains elements of transcendence and so on. Obviously in air it's even more stronger. Even the kalim have something, but it's completely concealed. But now he's going the other way around. What kind of impression does air have about where it's going? Does it know where it's going? Let's put it in those terms. So you could argue, the container is deep, like the body, deep inside, somewhere embedded, that's going to receive a neshama, a soul, and then ultimately they'll unite. But the soul knows, so to speak, that there's a body going to come. And when it knows it, does it affect it? So the fact is, the air, because of the Ratzon Atzmus, because God wants the earth to go into the container, the air have in them some type of, in their DNA, there's some programming that you're going to enter a container one day. You'll never become a container. You'll never be as defined as a container. But there's something that's called a particle within the wave. The particle Sheba wave. Okay? Physics talks about light, wave, and particle. I know they talk about the particles within the wave. But in a way, that's what it is. And that particle, so that's called the Savas Er Nasa Kli. And for the Hiskalus, obviously, it's a critical component because it basically tells that Er Makiv does not have that message, that DNA. And the Er Pnimi does. So with the Savas Er Nasa Kli, the Im Hayes, even though it's good to look in Etz Chaim whether Er Makiv has his Savas, I would assume he's talking here his Savas of Er Pnimi. So Er Pnimi. Even though, the critical point, the containers have a separate root than the root of the energies, like a body and a soul. When the soul leaves the body after 120, the body doesn't disappear. It takes time. Why? Because, like he says in Pasuk Eliyahu, "Ishtarik gufa b'lei nishmasa." It would be like letters on a page. Even if you take away the idea, the letters still are there, right? So they have their own root. Bottom line, however, how it actualizes in actuality, is through the air. Let me explain. When an artist takes a paintbrush to the canvas, so the container itself, the brush, is not rooted necessarily in the artist's brain. He had to get the brush somewhere else. You can sit and conceive all day art. You got to buy a paintbrush. So the brush itself, the tools itself, the instruments, are not rooted in the energy. They're rooted elsewhere. But for them to manifest, for them to do anything, the energy has to work through them. Here is even deeper. Here's even the paintbrush for to come into existence comes also through the energy. Not just the revelation of, not just the revelation of its function.
I'm not sure I completely understand the applicability of the marshal of particle and wave here. Because you talk about his avos from whatever dakus or adinus to his avos, it's a continuum, whereas wave and particle are two distinct entities.
Well, let me tell you, my understanding of it, my humble understanding was like this. I identify to the wave like almost to the bligvul of the air, and the particle to the gvul of the air. That way, because wave, by definition, is not definable particles. That's what I was referring to. So, my thinking of it is, theoretically here, is that the energy as it flows, let's say, from Atmos, is completely amorphous, bligvul. At some point, there's a will to make the air say, okay, now the air is going to manifest in the vision of 10 spheres. Still air. But 10 spheres already, you're talking, is going to be some identity there. And that identity wanted to be a tangible, a distinct identity. So I'm thinking, Lamata, that's when the wave begins to assume particle elements. That's what I meant. Chochma, Bina. Whereas, by wave, I think of wave like a field of energy. We can't distinguish between Chochma, Bina, and Chesed and Gvura. That's how I was thinking. So it was almost like, I understand what you're saying. From a physics point of view, it's wave of particle is just two ways, a light is both or neither, and when you measure it, it becomes one of them. But I was just thinking, I don't know, I have to see if this is consistent with physics, but I was thinking that a wave is, a light is initially wave, and then particle becomes later. Maybe there's a chiddush in physics, I don't know. But that's the only...
Quantum physicists will be the first to admit that they don't really understand.
Yeah, but it would be interesting if this theory is consistent with what they're looking into. It seems to me that's the right way to speak. If you definitely Chassidus is for sure the air has both has wave and particle. That's a given. That's easy to understand, and easy. And there's the two opinions whether air is more wave pshitim or wave is mitzuyer. Has particles in it. I was just saying Hisavas air adds something, because according to all opinions, even the opinion that air is amorphous and nebulous, it doesn't have shape, it is still Hisavas air is still an Etz Chaim. Everyone has to agree. The question is whether you could argue the Hisavas air is not from the air; it's really something coming from an outside message telling the energy that it has that. That's another discussion. In other words, the concept of Hisavas is generally, it's a statement of Etz Chaim. He brings it back in Perek Ches. The question is whether Hisavas has anything to do with the fact that energy is mitzuyer, that energy, according to the opinion, that energy has spheres in it. I mean, it definitely relates to the subject matter, but you have to say everyone holds that. I'm just going back to chapter 8. Yeah. Chapter 8, page 13. He says it's through the Kav is manifesting in the Rishima. That's how this. Look like 3/4 of the way down. I'm just reading it. Clearly, actually, this is very clear that it's not. There's nothing to that's. It's independent of the opinion that energy itself has shape. He's talking about Savas is even more than that, because I get it. There's two things. Energy has in it Chachma and Bina in a subtle way. It also has in it, from the Rishim and from elsewhere, the potential to actually shape the containers. Besides the fact that it's going to fit into them, it's actually the force that shapes them. It's like the kav is the paintbrush that will paint the container too. So that's the savas as the container element. Remember, we spoke that the fact that air has identity has nothing to do with the containers. It's not coming from the containers. It's the air itself is the vision of the divine vision that he wants to have 10 spheres. He doesn't need. There's another thing that the containers are going to be coming through the energy as well. So that's the additional element that energy has in its hisavis. You follow what I just said? Mm-hmm. So the truth is then, that in what I just said, then it's almost like two different levels of particles within the energy itself. Yeah. One is the particle, because the energy itself has so-called some definition, and one is the particles that come from something else that the energy is carrying that will allow it to create bodies, so to speak, create containers. Yeah, that comes from an interesting take. It's something that needs to be studied a little more, to see all the pitch of kasser, all the details. One second, I just want to say something. Want to see something?
There's a certain specificity in the identity of the that seeks a particular relationship with the davar acher.
That definitely comes from the Ratzna Atzmus, that the air, because of its bittul to the source, it's almost like the neshama knowing, even though al karcha chatachai, my personality is not to go into a body. I'm by nature transcendent, but it still knows that's where it has to go. So it has in it some recognition. Whereas, like, for example, let's say malachim don't have that energy; they can't even go into a body. Like the Nephilim, they would be destroyed by it.
It comes out the ore isn't made into the kli. The ore just shapes the kli.
Yeah, the ore.
Nasa kli doesn't mean nasa mamish.
Well, it's similar to how a child is formed. Once the egg is fertilized by the seed and begins to develop, it's not because the seed, because you have a neshama working here. There's a life force that's a catalyst. So even though the life force is not the root of the bones and the nerves, but the life force, besides giving it life, also makes it grow. That's the thing, and that's why when a person passes away, the body doesn't decomposes over time, but it does decompose. You could say, why does the body just remain? Because there is a relationship between them, even though they have two different roots. So it's two things. It remains because it has that source, but remember, even its substance ultimately comes to the soul. So after time passes, as the soul completely leaves, the body will decompose, and its own energy is not enough to keep it going. Because there is a connection. Besides the fact that let's say the kalim come from Seviv Kalman, the body and the air comes from Mamala Kalman. Seviv Mamala is informed by Seviv, and vice versa. So you can't just. It's not like, in other words, two energies like this, and then they come to a point and they come together. These two energies in their source are all connected. Then they break into two, and then they come back. So they speak to each other, and one is dependent on the other. The etzem luz remains. We say even a body decomposes, the etzem luz, that bone remains, because there's still something in the body that is rooted in a place that air has nothing to do with. But on the other hand, it's even its shape and form. So that's the constant you have to keep on seeing, that kalim here are both separate, but they come through. But remember, at the end of the day, the sherish of a keli is not in the oyer. Its root is not in the air. Its root is in a power. In other words, if air left on its own, would not suddenly turn into kalim. There wouldn't be no kalim. You need some other davar acher, some message coming from another place saying that definition. And that message also tells the air to have its tzir and to have the savas. All that we're discussing here. It's a very eloquent and complex structure, but it's all critical for the interface to work. I'm thinking in Aveda how it works. In Aveda, I'll give you an example. I have to think about it some more, but we always say, like he said earlier in the first Maimarim, in kavanas ha-mitzvahs. So when you do it because God wants you to do it, there's no difference whether it's Shabbos, kashrus, or tefillin. Okay? The Eved is doing what the master wants. It's an all equalizer, and that's why al tehei adam shekel, a person should measure this kala v'chamura. But the same Ratzon wants this to be kala and this chamura. This is a lenient mitzvah, this is a harsh one. So you're not supposed to weigh and say, I'm going to do this with more passion than that one. But there is a distinction. It's not our distinction. It's not because we're limited human beings. God made a distinction between them. That's what He wants. He wants this to be like that, to be like that. Now, the question is like, okay, so you could say there's two different kavod. There's general kavana klalis, that God wants me to do it. There's kavana pratis, tefillin, okay, shibud halev ha'mayach. When I put on tefillin, it's to bind my mind and my heart. When I keep Shabbos, it's to remember there's a creator, whatever it is. Matzah, amunah. But if you say that the air has within it already some of the kelim, you'd have to say that even the kavana klalis is already something preparing you for the kavana pratis. In other words, the prat is there already in the klal. It's not just, the beginning, Asher Kedeshanu, I only think about God and God's will. When I come to the second half of the blessing, I think about the specific mitzvah. In some way, the specific informs also the general. This needs to be developed a bit. I haven't seen it specifically, but that would be like real nafkamina here. You have to say something like this anyway. Because you're about to put on tefillin, you're making a bracha. Yeah, obviously there's the element of Ratzon, it doesn't make a difference what mitzvah, but you are in a second later going to have that kavanah. So how could that kavanah, the second one, not affect the first one? In other words, but the beauty here is that you really want to have the both of them in their pristine form. You want to have an element, you're just doing it because of Ratzon, because God wants. Another one, that you want the specific kavanah. This is exactly the issue here. Which is the more focused, the pshittus, the fact that it's Ratzon and not the detail, the individuality, or the individuality. And the truth is, you can't even really say one is better. The truth is both. And sometimes, I could even see, sometimes a person focuses more on one, sometimes more on the other. Yeah, and Habatali, exactly. And I guess at the end of the day, when you really train yourself, you could have both at the same time. That every mitzvah should be equal because they're all Ratzon, and still recognize the distinction. It's not simple because definitely, in Eastern philosophy is another. As soon as you start seeing the light, the details become less important. It's a natural process. As soon as you start getting into the unity, then diversity becomes less. What's the diversity? Like what's the difference? But it's interesting. Like when you talk about right brain and left brain, that TED conference talk that she gives, the neuroscientist. But it's a brilliant talk. I always forget her name. But anyway, she was a neuroscientist. She took the job because her brother had schizophrenia. So she went to that. Yeah. And then she has a stroke. Mm-hmm. It's called the stroke of genius, I think is the name of her talk. Yeah. And the left brain goes down, the details. And the right brain, chesed, gevura separates, like Eish. Chesed brain, the right is field of energy. And she can't pick up a toothbrush, though she can see it. So as much as you need the field of energy, everything is one, you also want the details. So when the right brain and left brain are working together, it just melds. But at the end of the day, it is ultimately a union of both, and the body is actually a perfect example. The body is exact paradox. What you keep saying here. Every faculty has to function exactly according to its rules for the whole body to be a healthy body. No way around that. And that's it. And at the same time, there's a one voice saying, you're part of a whole body. Eye and hand coordination, body coordination, the whole, that symbiotic element. Is there a theory for this in medicine, in holistic medicine? How this comes together? This type of one voice, this captain of the ship, at the same time, absolute diversity?
Chinese medicine.
Huh?
Chinese medicine addresses this in different contexts, different terminology.
Because it is ultimately achdus and ischalkus in the ultimate sense of the word. And hab hataya, mind you, it's not like optional. If it doesn't have the diversity, you don't have the unity.
It seems to me also in conventional medicine and Western medicine, there's probably also a relationship on the level of where genetics and epigenetics meet. It's probably also that, but they're just beginning to thrash that out because it's not quantifiable.
Right. I understand. Because the real question would be, who is that voice? Who's the conductor? Yeah.
Who's the healer? Who's the healer?
Okay, good. So b'poil, even though they have different roots, but come on, Sava's b'poil to come on, damn tzoy sayer. Valkein is Sava kli kfi efen ed, and that's why the kli was shaped, fashioned to be commensurate, proportionate to the energy. Hayna shetiyeh muchenes lekabel sayer, which means it should be prepared to receive this energy. So this is the inyan. This is the explanation. Why is the medida? Why are they so receptive to each other? It's because despite the fact they have two different roots, but one is fashioned from the other. One will emerge through the other. Okay. Take away Sava Sa'er. Let's see here what would happen. So you have energy coming from before the tzimtzum. Okay, it's a kav. Let's even call it defined energy. It's 10 spheres. The creation of the container would have to be a miracle. Would have to be like a koyach hamafil lasis type of thing. Because how is energy... Remember, containers don't just pop up. The energy has to give it... Now let's talk from the soul and the body. The seed is fertilized, and now it's starting to grow. Had it not been, had the life of force had not attached itself there, it wouldn't grow. It would be a dead seed, basically, a dead egg, an unfertilized egg. So something, the life force starts making it work, starts growing. So in a way, you could either say this is a miracle, that something the life force has is something that's causing one of them to join. No, because the life force is not overwhelming. It's not like the sun. Because you put a sun in there, the sun will just burn everything up. The life force is recognizing it recognizes what it's making grows because it's working step by step. It's not like just shining electricity that will overwhelm the whole of the circuits. So the life force has that element and it's shaping it. So you can either say that, or if you say that the life force has within it some message, some isavos, then of course it makes it a lot more sensible. I mean, I'm just spelling it out. What it would be like if it wasn't that way.
So the muscle, like DNA and chromosomes, that potentially it can create X and Y chromosomes.
Right. And they say originally everyone begins as a female, right? And then it breaks into a male chromosome. Right? Which is interesting. It means everything is like Malchus, and then come Giluyim, so to speak.
Malchus being the central cog is also...
Yeah, Malchus here, the Nakuda that's rooted in...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's something that either shapes it that will remain, will become a Malchus Begili, or it will be a Zah. Like that Chassidus Shabbat was learning Chassidus all day. They told him now it's time to date. She said, what's dating? They say, you go out with a girl. Okay, he goes on a date, he comes running back, he says, she doesn't look like Malchus at all, So of course then they said, you look like Zah, So Malchus, what were you expecting? I remember once by Fabring, it was 2 B'Av, I think, Lamed Hey. That would be 75. Yeah, so the Rebbe spoke that siyum in Masechta Tainus, the famous siyum he always talks. And to Bob, the Bnei Yisrael go out in the fields, and they dress up, and the michases and all this, and then they say, Bacher sana inecha, Bacher, raise your eyes. They say who they are. So the Rebbe said, we learn 2 things from this. That before they say, raise your eyes, you don't raise your eyes. And when time comes, you have to look. You can't just be looking in the books. The Rebbe said the double hira. It was practical. That year, I think a bunch of guys got engaged. Some Nachshusha guys that needed to be told, you got to look. Okay, so that's why Alkein Sava Kelik fi Efen Ha'er. And the primary medida, so he said he's saying 2 things. That this medida, this measurement that makes chokhmah and bina and bria bria and reish guf regel, each one their thing, does not come just from the containers, it comes also from the measurement of the energy. Then he says, and also the measurement of the container is according to the energy, because, he just explained, because the energy, the containers themselves emerge and are fashioned through the hisavus, through the thickness or particles within the energy. But now he's going back. But the primary medida, this is important, because you could say the primary medida, the primary shape, is from the containers. But I think what he's saying here is ikra medida, meaning in the vision of the artist. The primary thing that determines this is chachma, this is bina, is he's saying now. Well, we'll see where he goes with this. Who ba'ers in the energy? Be'eze efen yer be'elmes. In what form, in what fashion will it radiate in the worlds? Now comes a rather long parenthesis. Okay, not so long. Parentheses. V'yashleimar the b'sheresh harishin medidas hakelim kedim l'medidas seir. We could say then the root, in the first root, the measurement, medidas hakelim, the measurement of the containers precedes the measurement of the energy. The tachlis hakavonu b'isavas hakelim, because the ultimate purpose is in the formation, is in the bringing into being of the containers. Hisavus is not bria. Hisavus means like from the word havia, that something comes into being. This means that the building, the structure of the chemer is the matter. The structure of matter precedes in the root is preceded in the root to the tzura, to the form. Sometimes we say form and function, but I think form and function, form then is chemer and function is tzura, right? Here is the other way around. Here being nachem means basically chemer means matter. It's basically matter and spirits. It really be the right words, matter and energy. Because form, we don't mean form here as in like in a limited way. We mean form as opposed to the raw matter. But chemer and tzura usually mean spirit and matter, or spirit and energy. Chemer and tzura is form and chemer is bria, and tzura is sometimes yitzira, but that's not what he means here. Here he means the substance of the world, the substance of the containers is in its root. It precedes the energy within them, because the kavana, that's the purpose.
I was going to say intention. Tzura has form and function together.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And this is the reason why the containers above draw the energy. So now we're going the other way around. Till now we talked about how energy has within it the DNA, the message of the particles of the container. Now we're speaking that containers have something what they give to the energy. They are the ones that draw them out. Not like the containers below, meaning by us. That only receive the thing that is placed within them. Or contain the thing that is placed within them. Above, containers actually transmit energy. The truth is also lamata they transmit. No. But I think what he means is, I guess he's going to speak more obvious and probably also more seamless. Like here a container could technically also conceal and not draw much. It could. He says. That's lamata. So clearly, what he means lamata, I think what he means. I'll tell you what he means by lamata. He means cups. A cup, a pure gashmizdika container, right? A vessel does not draw anything. It can be appropriate container. Wine barrels will preserve wine, but they don't draw wine.
It could be argued that the cup is also waiting for the wine, but it has a longer wait.
But I mean to say, there's nothing in the cup that obviously Talmidei Yesem Mekulim, for example, students will draw more from their teacher, but that's already a ruchnistic example. He means lamata. Okay. That's the best proof. Every haguf is lamata, not lamayla. Like the limbs, the organs of the body. How do you translate Avery? Organs or limbs? Or both? Parts.
It depends on context.
Right, here it means everything. So the parts of the body draw the energy. The reason for that is because the root of the containers precedes that of the energy. Now remember, this is a parenthesis, qualifying. But let's continue. Still parentheses. This is in a way answering a subtle question. He began, before the parentheses, he made a statement that the primary medida shape comes from the energy. But even though he didn't phrase it in a question form, so what does it mean that when we say that the root of the containers is higher than the energy? Which means that the medida really comes not from the energy, it comes from the containers. So that's what he's addressing here. However, this is after the container is refined. That according, commensurate to the measure, or the method, the form of its refinement, it transmits, it draws the energy. But in the beginning of its formation, of its coming into being, it's from the thickness of the energy that makes the container. So he's more than qualifying just what I just said. I think it's bigger than that. Let's finish the parentheses and I'll try to. And same as b'sharsham, same thing is in the measurement. Okay. The b'sharsham medidas hakelim kodem l'medidas eres. In its root, the measurement and the parameters of the energy of the containers precedes the measurement of the energies. V'rag b'his galus medidas er kodem. And only in the revealed state, in other words, in the process, is that the measurement of the energy comes first. This is the inyan that we learned, that the machshava, in the thought, you say earth. You say, God created heaven and earth. So there's two opinions, Shammai and Hillel. Which came first? So this one says the earth came first. This one says heaven came first. The answer is, in machshava, seif ma'is machshava tchila, in machshava, eretz came first, because that's the purpose. Is he wants earth, he doesn't want heaven. But practically, b'shtei savus, in its actual process, Shemayim came first. The Gilui came first. So what's he qualifying in this parentheses? A few things. First of all, let's go back to the Savas air thing. First of all, containers come into being because of the thickness or the particles within the energy. Good. Therefore, that explains why the measurement of the containers is tailored to how it will draw down the energy. That's the explanation. So the containers are shaped based on how the energy is. But here he wants to say even more than that. He wants to say not only does the energy determine how the containers are going to be shaped, he's saying the shape in the energy itself is the primary force that determines structure of existence. This is the main chiddush that he's saying in this chapter here. That's how he began. So first he started, it's not just because of the containers, but the energy has in it a shaper. He's leading to the kav, that the kav is the primary cause of milo mata, okay? Of higher and lower. So first he began that's just the containers, but also the energy. Then he said that even what the containers do also comes through the energy. And now he's going back that the primary v'ikr shaping is all from the energy. But now in the parentheses he wants to qualify. If that's the case, how do we reconcile that? If the energy is the driving force here, how do we reconcile that with the whole concept that the root of it all is the containers? That's a driving force. The driving force of existence, of structure, is the kavanah al-yena, which the containers contain. The purpose is not the energy, the purpose is the containers. So that's why the shaders, the root of the containers, precedes the energy. So the explanation is, yes, it precedes it in the kavanah, but in the process, what is the primary agent? What's the word I want to use? Like in chemistry, you have sometimes the dominant. It's like the dominant gene. It's the dominant catalyst. Even though another more like some dormant element may ultimately be the real cause of the chain reaction, but what is the catalyst is a critical. So the catalyst of it all is the energy. He's not saying the kavanah is the energy. In kavanah, like he says, earth is first. But in practicality, what is the primary driving force that defines structure in Ishtalshlus? It's going to be energy, not containers. So containers is the purpose. That's the purpose of it all. But what makes it happen is the energy. So the fact that the root of the containers is higher is only in the root. And then, of course, he adds, and it's only after they get refined that you see that emerge. Right.
It's like primal cause and immediate cause.
Right. So the containers definitely have the power to draw energy out. That's why, because their root is higher. But in the process of how this takes place, is the energy has to come first and make it all happen. So he says, that's what he says, B'chenu ba'medid, two things. That the root of the containers is not is concealed, and it's only after the energy refines the container. That's when it draws the energy through, and more energy. But in the process of how this emerges, how this happens, they come from Esavos. Containers on their own are not refined. That's going to take work. On their own, they're the particles, they're the thickness within the energy that makes them come into being. Their root is that there's their purpose, but the bottom line is, in any revealed way, they're not there right now. They're thick and a concealed state of being. One second. But then he says, "V'chenu ba'medida." So, both in its way it's created, and the same thing in the measurement of the containers, is its root. The reason the containers are defined, because in their root they are higher than the management of the energy. But in the process of creating this structure, that energy is the primary agent, the primary force. Yeah. Saying a few things here, but they're what's unclear? Why is that helpful here? Why is that necessary?
What does it look like? What's going on there? What's going on in Zikha? Is this the Keli recognizing the or within the Keli? Becoming more aware of its
no, it is that, but a different point he wants to make. He wants to make is that to say something is very relevant to what we discussed about the Tachtenim, by the way, and Gili. Tachtenim fundamentally, that's not just some incidental thing. They're fundamentally concealers. That's the whole purpose. That's why they're mushrish and atzmos. They're not, like light waiting to be revealed. It's real darkness. So the purpose in the mind of the divine plan is there be containers, and those containers be transformed. But to start saying that because the purpose is there, and therefore they're rooted, to say they are the primary agent that brings everything and makes things happen, no. They're the purpose. It's almost like the purpose. Yeah. No, it's almost like this. It's almost like saying the whole purpose of parents is to bring up healthy children. But the driving force of education is not in the children's hands. So they are the object of it all. But they're not the ones that... So that's what he's saying. So if the Kalim have any zichach on them before, then that whole thing would be upset. The point he's making here that it's only that the fact that we're speaking about shaders, don't confuse that with the process. The root, they're rooted in a higher place. But that also is only after and because of that they draw more energy. But that too is because of their zichach, not because they have giluyim. Don't turn them in. Don't worship them. They're not a force of revelation. They're a force of the purpose. This goes back exactly to what we spoke about, because, in other words, the respect of Giluyim is critical, because Giluyim is like it's like what Kairach said. We're all holy. What do we need Moshe Rabbeinu for? The kelim are holy. The answer is no. The kelim are sheir. You're talking about sheirish kelim. You're talking about the kelim are holy. The kelim are not holy. The kelim are kelim. They have a root and their purpose is higher. That's what he's saying here. That's saying two things here. One is their root is higher, and that's where they draw. But b'tchilas hisavus, the bottom line is hisavus ha'er. They're coming from thickness. They're not coming from gili. In other words, if energy continues to extend itself without the hisavus, without its thickness, it's not becoming a container. A container is defined by its concealing element. It's not transcendent in nature, though the purpose is specifically to bring it into containers. And medida. So on the root, you can say, like in other words, he's saying that ikra medida, the primary measurement of structure of existence, comes from energy. What do you mean? In the root, the primary comes from the containers. The whole purpose is the measurement. Why does energy have structure? Because you want the containers. But that's the root. Like Vizgal's medida say kodem. So machshava, right. So eretz kodma, when you say the land, if you talk about purpose, kelim is the driving force in God's mind. But the driving force in actuality is the kav, as he's going to now say. Yeah, it's very interesting, and this is critical because you see, this is the key element of, you want to have the containers, but you don't want them to be the dominant force. You need transcendence. You need the neshama to guide the body, not the body to guide the soul, even though the body's root is higher than the soul. That would be why Yaakov took the blessings. Esav is the bchar, because the sheirish haguf in some ways is higher than the sheirish of the neshama. Esav is what? The warrior. Ish Sayed, Yedei Melchama, the warrior. But in that warrior, he's, like Rav Tfu is b'koyach sheir, he has a power. But on his own, he's blind. He sees he's hungry, you give him the Zid Adashim, He
throws it all away.
Right. So you need the soul to so to speak, train the body how to appreciate its blessings. If you had the yesh of the body running the show, we go off on who knows where. So yesha nivr, yesha amiti. The body is ultimately the thing that connects with Atzmus, but it has to come through the soul as the captain of the ship. You cannot have the ship defining where we're going. This is the constant battle. That would be why you need Torah, why you need mitzvahs, why you need guidance. Yeah. And it's so back and forth, because even the thickness of the containers also comes, even their helam comes from the air. This avus with the ayin. Now, the Rebbe brings, and this is that sometimes the air has really two functions in this context. It brings the yesh into being, and also then reveals the mile of the yesh. So it has two real functions in this process. So it brings it into being, and then later reveals its deeper purpose. So it's like what the Rebbe says, that tshuva is higher than Torah. But who's Megala that? Torah itself is Megala that. Yeah, no, it's clear. You got to, it's not black and white. You have to have a. So let's continue.
So we were saying practically that the sphere is actually made through his havas, so the clay is made through his opposite, or as far as that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not just that Sira it's giving it, and the formation of the clay comes up.
Right.
It's like Birusheni also. I think you just said that. It's like a Birusheni.
In a way, later he speaks about Birusheni. It's not exactly, because the first one's not really a birur. It's really three steps. One is just brings it into being. Look, the fact that the soul begins the journey with the body from the moment of conception. So number one, they understand each other very early on. So it brings it into being. So the air is, we're not strangers. And then comes the process of the air training the body, and this whole revealing the deeper purpose of it all.
And eventually seeing the mila of the body.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, really they both see the mile of each other. Because the air brings bittul into the picture. The keli brings purpose into the picture. So, to continue. Now back outside of the parentheses. Now he's explaining now. So all this was a preparation to explain a critical thing here. This is a very important section right now. Well, it's all important, but this is like a punchline here. So you see here, like this is what it's like. It says in Etz Chaim that the transmission of the kav literally means line. So kav chut, line and thread, the thin ray of light we call it. It came to create and shape the progression of higher and lower, gradation, degrees. What we call mokim and ruchnius, conceptual space, is degree, is dimension, is position. So you say a teacher is higher than a student. It can be shorter physically, but his position is one of. So the Mailamata is shaped by the kav.
Hierarchy.
The hierarchy, yes, right. I use that word, even though hierarchy politically is a different story. But yeah. The thing is, so in other words, all this is coming to explain Etz Chaim, the kav. Okay, so that's what Kate Smile Lamata means. If there was no transmission, if the transmission was not through the kav is this ray of light. There would have been no grade, no hierarchy in the world. Can you say that hierarchy? The kol elam hoye bashva b'chol chalokov. Because every world would have been equalized in all its parts. And they would not have been recognizable, distinguishable, the parts of the 10 spheres. Move Sha'arim is a less known sefer from the Arizal than Etz Chaim. Yeah. So there's Etz Chaim, there's Etz Chaim, and there's Move Sha'arim. You usually will find Etz Chaim obviously much more popular, but they're both there. But Etz Chaim and Move Sha'arim were actually cited earlier because they were published earlier. Huh? What?
Not from Chaim Vital.
Yeah, all from Chaim Vital. No, not from Yisrael Surug. No, that's different. That's Emek Hamela. That's a different Kabbalah. But there are details of Move Sha'arim and Etz Chaim does not say it in Etz Chaim. But there's very similarities also. The concept of Tzimtzum are in these three places. The beginning. See, clearly, Move Sha'arim says this, what we just said here. That had it not been for the Kav, all the worlds, everything would have been one equal, like one soup, without distinction. Think of it like Breishis Bar Elokim Shemaim Sa'aretz v'ha'aretz ha'isa toiv v'vayu v'cheshach al pnei tahem v'ruach Elokim rachefes al pnei mayim. Then he says v'yemer Elokim yihi eir v'hi eir. That's the Kav. The world in Pasuk 2 is a tzimtzum. Generally speaking. V'alkein hu amshacha de'akav b'dei sheyeh ma'il lamata. Even mathematically, we learned a few chapters back, Nakud de Kav Shetach. The point, the line, the plane. So we learned there that the Nakuda is the first step. That's where it's all concentrated, like the Esser sphere Sagnuzas, the 10 hidden spheres. The Kav is the Kav that comes after the Tzimtzum. That's already now you have distinct spheres, but it's still meaning it's still under the influence of the transcendence before the Tzimtzum. And then is how they come into that's what the three things. How they come into containers, that's Shetach. So he's going out to Kav. The Kav is the one that is. Mathematically speaking, basically, a point, a line is infinite amount of points. So you have the point, a line is the shortest space between 2 points, basically. The shortest point. The shortest path between 2 points. So a line is what carries a point in geometry, in mathematics, to a shetach, to a width and length. Erech and Rechev is the in between is the line, because basically a plane is a bunch of lines. So you have like the point is no dimensions. A line is 1 dimension. Shetach is 2 dimensions, and then there's the 3-dimensional. So that's how it works mathematically too. Point, line, plane. So that's what we're saying. Now the line is the one that makes Mailamata. The point has no higher and lower. There's no hierarchy in a point.
I'm intrigued by this idea that there could be a conception of Eilmos der Bashva.
Yeah. Because I'll tell you why. Because because of the Kayach HaGvul of Ein Sof, where God envisioned it, think of it like this. If there was no tzimtzum, and there was no kav, think of an artist who has infinite possibilities to create art, but then he has one piece of art he wants to create, but he has no tools to do anything with it. And some way you're able to get into his brain and get a CAT scan of that image, what would you have? You'd have exactly that. You'd have an image with thousands of details, but it wouldn't have the tangible concreteness of diversity that that this world is capable of. It would be like going into a machshava of an idea that's very clear to you. You know exactly what you want, but it's purely on the thought level.
It can't be condensed at all.
It's like in this type of science fiction things. A very fascinating, thought experiment would be: what would a world look like if it was purely the image of your image projected, and that's it, nothing else. No breakdown into words, into letters, into transmission. An image. If your machshava could create, what would it look like? That's essentially what he's saying here. So the machshava has its seer, because he's definitely envisioning a structure. We're not talking here, then it's not even called ashva. Then you're talking about altogether. There's not even spheres. But here there is, but it's all in that type of state. The closest examples for this would be a seed. Look at the full-blown child, adult. And how is that possible in that moment of conception? It's like almost impossible to imagine. Even the seed of a tree. You look at the seed, it's like nothing's there.
Like without a vertical dimension.
Right.
It's flatland. It's not really flat. That's what's the poor Marshall put.
No, yeah. Look, because a seed at the end of the day is still a physical thing. You could just say, okay, it's microscopic. Everything is in there. But it still gives you see concentration, you see what happens when the thing. But in the seed, there's no ma'alamata. There's no way that a seed. There's no height. There's no. Okay.
There's no part of the seed that's going to become the top of the tree, or part of the seed that's going to become the bottom.
Right. Even though there is in there that those elements. The message, I guess. Example would be perhaps today. I would love to see it also. You see in computer programming. The zeros and ones, once you start, they are, they are a language that will define itself at in the interface stages, of later stages of, let's say, the user side, the front end. What does the back end look of the front end? Even though it's the same thing that's writing the code for that front end. Yeah. It's like the code. It's the code of the DNA before it becomes manifest. There's many ways to explain it. I mean, the point is, okay, and that's why there's a transmission through the kav, in order for it to be higher and lower. Now, kav, remember, is critical here, because what's the line? Why can't you jump from an akudah, from a point, straight to a shetach, to a plane, to an area? So, because this is the kav. The kav, its upper part, its top, the top of the kav is negei, is touching v'dovuk, and is connected, attached to the infinite light that was before the tzimtzum. And in its bottom part, the lowest part, the lowest edge, the top edge, lowest. K'tzei is edge. K'tzei is the It doesn't extend through the whole black hole of the chol of the dark space. It doesn't extend all the way to Ein Sof HaSeviv, which would be the circle. It only goes a portion of it. That's below the worlds. Remember, he's not talking higher, lower in physical. He's talking conceptually. Because I don't know if he's going to say this, but if the kav would go, what it says in Etz Chaim is the kav extends and does not go all the way to the bottom and reconnects it, because if it did, there'd be no ma'alamata again. Because then you're talking about a circle. The bottom would be just as close to the top as the top would be. Right, exactly. So that's what it means, tachas elemis. So Ein Sof HaSeviv would be the complete circle that surrounds all of existence, that in a sense has withdrawn, been concealed. The kav comes in, but the kav is closer to the top than to the bottom. It doesn't even go to the bottom. Ve'ein dovek boy, and it's not attached to it. So then through this, you have the kav, a reish v'seif, a head and an end, a beginning and an end, a top and a bottom. And through this, it infuses, it shapes Eilmas, the worlds and the spheres. I remember we spoke both of the worlds in chapter 35, the spheres in chapter 34. That they too should have hierarchy. The Hamakabli Melyene Shel Kav, Shekorav Yesel and Sof. That those that receive from the higher parts of the Kav, Melyene Shel Kav, from the heights of the Kav, from the top of the Kav, of this ray of light, that are which is closer to the infinite divine light. This is the Maila, this is the higher part of the Kav. Those spheres and worlds that that receive their energy from that part, they are higher in the hierarchy. And that which, and the more something gets distant from that high point, from the top, that's what defines it being lower. So the definition of higher and lower is essentially where they're receiving the quality and the intensity of the energy they're receiving. If it's from a higher point in the line, it's going to be a higher level. For the lower point, it's a lower level. That's how higher and lower is defined. Okay. V'zehu shakav nikar kav hamida. And this is why the kav is called the ruler, the measuring rod, the yardstick, the what do they call it? The tape measure. Kav hamida. So let me just, the hashvis. It's always like to compare kav hamida. So back when, if you remember, he explained according to the opinion that the air, at the end of chapter 28. So there he spoke about kav hamida. He actually says at the bottom there, if you see Komeshis Bar Bezes Hashem, Kav Hamoided Beif and Eres Tlim, Eres Agluyim Bezes Firis. Okay. Good, very good. So Kav Hamida, so now he's going to explain, this is the meaning of the word Kav Hamida. Ayin Masha, here's a little parenthesis. Ayin Masha Kosaba Bir de Va'ata Yigdal Shalei Nitfas. Look at the explanation of the Maimer Ata Yigdal, which is Parasha Shlach, Shalei Nitfas, meaning not printed in Lakutei Torah. So my mom from the Alter Rebbe, not printed, would be called Shlei Nitfas, because Al-Kutera was only a distillation. For today we have it, Memoria ad Murazakh. That's all the Memoria of the Alter Rebbe. And we can say that the source of what it says there is from this Etz Chaim. I have to look up what it says there to know what he means. So why is it called Kav Hamida? I guess he explains there what the meaning of Kav Hamida is. It's from Etz Chaim, the Etz Chaim that defines here Ma'ilomata. Because through the Kav is that energy, that force, that catalyst that measures the energies. If the transmission should be from the higher, upper parts of the Kav, of this line, parts of the Ak, like the parts of Avak. Parts of is a configuration, is a full. Ever translate parts of configuration? Huh? Parts of is when you take a few elements and you turn them into like an alloy in chemistry, where definitely it's not one. Like you say, partsufim, parts of meichen is a parts of zah. It's parts of literally means a face, but a face. What is a face? A face is more than is a sum of parts, but more than the sum of parts. It's really the configuration of several elements into something greater than the sum of the parts. Usually a parts of
containing all the elements, of being a complete.
But you could have different partsufim. There's the partsufim in the parts of Ak, parts of Atzil. There's different. But each one is not a sphere. You can nekuda kav partsuf. Sometimes his expression nekuda kav partsuf, the same thing. Partsuf is shetach in a sense. So nekuda would be the point. The kav is the line. Partzuf is when it shapes something. It shapes an entity, basically.
It means nothing in Midas.
No, Partzuf could be anything. Partzuf the Ak, like he says here.
It doesn't include nothing.
No, there's the Partzuf. Shemekabel Mechinus Aliyenu Shel Kav. He's not talking about, so the Kav measures if the transmission is from a higher part of the Kav, the upper part, like the Partzuf of Ak. Ak is the first world that emerges from the Kav. Shemekabel Mechinus Aliyenu Shel Kav. It receives from the higher levels of the Kav, Shu B'Kirav Le'ein Sev Baruch Hu, which are close conceptually to the infinite divine light. And the worlds below Ak, they receive in a distant way. And the same thing is with every specific sphere. This is because this is what it says in Etz Chaim, that in Keser and Chachma, the divine infinite light radiates closely, B'kirav Makim. And in Bina, distant, from a distance. What does this mean? You say close distance. He's going to explain. This is what it means. Because the Bina radiates the Ein Sof in the way it's already comprehensible. It's already in the category of comprehension. And Chachma, wisdom, is the radiation of Ein Sof. The way it's higher than comprehension. Yet higher. As we shall discuss. He's just giving the whole picture now. And it's also known that there are tzenedes pratim channels, individual, specific channels for each sphere of befrat. So the kav, think of it as an artery. Think of it as an artery that breaks off into branches. And each sphere has its own, like he's saying, that's what he says, that there's specific tzenedes, branches, or channels, that for each sphere. And look into delve or ayin delve. Engross yourself. In Bir Azer, this is usually the Mittler Rebbe's Bir Azer that he heard from the Alter Rebbe, explaining the Zohar Pasha Vayishlach al Pasuk. Ki Yesharim Darkei Hashem. Darkei Hashem. So there he discusses this whole thing with the paths, how the branches out and how the different channels of how the Kav manifests.
It's talking
about the air now.
The ore goes through the Kav, level by level, and it's going to connect at each different level with what has it at that level. But still, our beginning of the topic said his Avasa ore.
That's not the beginning. The Savasar is a qualification. The beginning is that the Medida, the shape of the structure of existence, comes from energy. And the containers are also shaped according to that energy, because they come from the Isavas, the thickness within that energy. But the main point here is that the energy is the shaper of structure of existence.
Right.
So he's not talking about containers here at all. He's talking here how the process, how the Kav creates higher and lower. So the Kav is a measurer.
So to speak, the energy, how your energy is found.
How the energy creates a higher and lower, the Kav particularly. This line, how it creates and shapes, fashions the hierarchy of existence, basically. So he's giving all kinds of, he spoke about the Etz Chaim, that's rooted there. Then he spoke about how the Mailamata, how the higher parts of the Kav is more energy, less lower energy. Now he went into Keser Chacham Bina, the distance. And now he's going to add a new thing, that is the Tzeneres Pratim. It's all showing you how the Kav is essentially, it creates this labyrinth of energy flowing all over the place. It's like think of it like a circulatory system. Artery that just branches off to all these different levels. Later they will manifest in containers, but he's moved away from the containers right now.
The explanation is, I understand the explanation,
but part of this,
I'm touching on it, but I wonder if that was going to be the result.
No, listen, the result will be energies that will be able to manifest in containers. That's the end of the process. But We're talking about how that happens, how that takes them. Ubepardes b'shar hakinuyim oish shin. This is shar kinuyim, yeah, shar kinuyim it must be, yeah. The pardes, shar kinuyim, meaning the gate of, I guess, names.
It's like a glossary almost. It's like
yeah.
A Kabbalistic glossary.
Oish shin, so he has their letters, the letter shin. Kosev, shir kaima. Shir kaima means the measurement of the height of the structure. Shir kaima is usually the measurement of the structure. Shir kaima. The whole shir kaima. Shaneshama hamesached is beteicha sfira nikra shir mepnei sheinas anesana shir l'chol kaima. V'hi hayemeres l'sfiras dai. Okay. This is the language from Etz Chaim in Pardes, so it's a little dense. The Shir Kaima, there's an expression called in Kabbalah, the Shir Kaima. Shir Kaima usually refers to a different term for the structure. Shir Kaima, the measurement of Kaima literally means height, but Kaima means Kaima Sada, means the human structure. So he's explained, said, so how does this work? And the Shama HaMesachad B'teicha Sfira is Nikra Shir, that the soul that is, I guess, united with the spheres, maybe it's what he says in Tanya, that the Keichas HaNefesh come from the 10 spheres. Nikra Shir Mipnei She'enesena Shir L'chol HaKeima. Why is it called a measurement, a Shir? Because it is the one that imbues shape into the whole structure of the human being. Whole structure of actually not the human being, not talking about human being, he's talking about the whole structure of existence. And it is she that says to the spheres, die, enough. It's like the brakes. It's saying flow, but it measures the flow, basically. That's why he's bringing it, that the Pardes is essentially discussing the measurement of the flow. And the Pardes is the same Pardes. And similarly, he writes in the gate of Atzmos V'Kelim, chapter 7, a similar idea. Bottom line is he's bringing proofs here from Kabbalah, the idea that the kav, the energy, is the one that shapes the structure, not the containers. Well, if Mashakosov Sham, and according to what it says there, meaning in Pardes, the second Pardes, Zeu Ratzon HaMaitzel Baruch Hu B'Inyan HaSfiras. This is the will, the desire of the emanator, Lesbihi, in the spheres. Well, Etz Chaim, and according to what it says in Etz Chaim, it is because this is what has been already envisioned and shaped in the supernal will. The way the kav, in order that the transmission of the kav, in the way its closeness and its distance. He's basically, the Pardes and the Etz Chaim speak different languages. So the Pardes, he's saying this is the Ratzon HaMaitzel. In Etz Chaim language, it would be how in God he's envisioning what's going to happen. The bottom line is that all the way up to the source, there is an envisioning of this structure, even before the kav actually transmits. In the Ratzon, the God is envisioning that the kav is going to have a higher and lower. So Nimtza, from all this we conclude, we find basically that the measurement, the hierarchy of higher and lower is in the energy. It determines what form these energies will be nimshach, will be transmitted into the spheres. So we see from this, as such, from the 10 spheres, there's ischalkus ma'alamata, heim ba'eris v'heim ba'kelim, which is the whole building up. There's diversity of higher and lower, a hierarchy, both in the energies and in the containers, not just in the containers. However you want to interpret it, either way. If the medida is in the energy, the measurement is in the energy, and according to this, commensurate to this, the kelim are shaped and fashioned. Or the measurement is the parameters on the container. Tamshich haseir. Then, a commensurate to this, it will draw the energy. The be'emes shnei emes. See, there's twice emes here. In truth, they're both right. They're both true. In other words, you start asking what chicken or the egg? Where does it begin? The truth, they're both. The betchila says gala, samadidi ba'er, be'ez, efen yer, is gala. In the beginning of the revelation, the measurement comes from the energy, the kav, obviously, because it's the first thing to emerge in revelation. And it determines be'ez, efen yer, what form will it radiate, is gala, and reveal itself. The lifi efen zeh, hu esav esakel. According to this, is how the containers will be shaped. As he said, esav with iron, from the thickness of the energy, will come the container. Then afterwards, back to zichuch. Then, according to the measure, to the amount of refinement of the containers, they will draw the energy. So, bottom line, both medidas have an impact here. Both structures have impact. Whether it's the structure from the energy impacting the containers, or later the structure of the containers impacting the energy. And all this is not shaykh, is not relevant only to internalized, integrated energies. That manifest inside containers, which have within them the measurement, the definition, the parameters, in a form of diversity, of higher and lower. We have here a poet and an artist and a mystic all in one. Okay, let me finish the mimer here. Since we're ready this, we're going to finish the mimer. I'm going to go through quickly. So, this sums up the chapter, that the air, and the air is the medida of the air. Now you have according to the above, we'll understand what it says, which is the end of the discourse. In other words, answering the questions in the beginning. What means B'Rosh Chachechem? And we learned in the beginning, V'hiksha b'Zayar, he asked in Zayar, V'chikama Reish Inun. How many, why say Rosh Chachechem? How many heads are there? V'aloi les Reish l'sir ela Shimsha. Isn't it true that the only head that the only source that a moon has is the sun? And the answer is there, Elareshi train Yaakov and Yosef, that there's two heads, there's two sources, Yaakov and Yosef. Like he said in Migdash Melech, that it's Yesod and Malchus, I believe. Right? The Pharisee and Yesod, I'm sorry. The Pharisee and Yesod. The Inyan in this is the Hinayisi b'me'er e'er. Me'er e'er is a very fundamental Kabbalistic work, which is also like a glossary. It goes by alphabetical order. What does he say in Me'er e'er? The Tfilas Musaf, Ubchinas Yesod, the Musaf prayer, the additional prayer on Shabbos and Yom Tov, is the level of Yesod, Shabam B'Spesei Teisvis. That's why it's called Musaf. It comes as an additional. It comes in we say Teisvis is usually like the secret of the addition, but it means in the form of an addition. Hu inyan yichud Yisrael v'Rachel. That's the unity of Yisrael and Rachel. This is the difference between the morning prayer and the Musaf prayer. The Tefillah Shachas hu yichud Yaakov v'Rachel. The first prayer, the morning prayer, is the unity, the union of Yaakov and Rachel, not Yisrael, as he's called Yaakov. But Tefillas Musaf hu yichud Yisrael v'Rachel. And Musaf is the union of Yisrael. What's the difference between Yaakov and Yisrael? The Yaakov v'loshen Bekiya. Yaakov is from the word Bekiya, which means to pierce, to break through. That then you will pierce through like the rays of the dawn. So it's like a pierce. It's not just a plain reflection. Yisrael is an essential level. Both of them are the level of Chachma, Kabbalah Yisod Abba, because it's both Yisod Abba. Rak Yaakov b'chinas ha'aras ha'Chachma, v'Yisrael b'chinas atzmis ha'Chachma. So Yaakov is the reflection of Chachma, of wisdom, in a piercing way, not regular, not just a reflection, but a piercing. Yisrael is the essence of Chachma. Like it says in Likutei of the Arizal. The Arizal also has a Likutei Torah on the Parshas. It says on the pasuk Vayakom Edis BiYaakov, V'Teira Sam BiYisrael, that you will get raised Vayakom Edis testimony, witness to Yaakov, and Teira Sam BiYisrael, and Teira you will place. That's the difference between Edis and Teira. The Yaakov of B'chinas Edis Levad. Yaakov is only like a form of testimony, of witness. Lo Etzem Adavar. He's a Edis, a sign that testifies to something else, not the thing itself. Yisrael b'chinas atzmus hadavar. Yisrael is the essence of the thing. V'hu inyan edison v'nesuyin. This is the difference between edison and nesuyin. In English, edison is the betrothal, and nesuyin is the marriage.
Betrothal.
Huh?
Betrothal.
Right. The edison inyan nevlis chachma shalamayla teira. Edison is the first stage in a marriage where they bind it to each other, and that's nevlis chachma. There's an expression. Nevlis chachma shalamayla teira. Nevlis are the leaves that fall from wisdom. They're like the leaves. They're not the wisdom itself. It's like the leaves of a tree. The remainders, that are higher than Teira. V'nesuyin, and the second stage, actual marriage, Hamshach atzmus b'chinas atzmus ha'chachma. Not nevlis. The essential. It's a essential transmission. Comes from the essence of chachma. And these two levels is the outer Teira and the inner Teira. The Chetzenis HaTeira Mepchinas Chetzenis HaChachma. The outer Teira is generally from the outer Chachma, the outer dimension of Chachma. The B'derech Klal Harizeh Ha'areh Levad. In general, this is only a reflection, lo ya'etzem mamash, not the actual essence. U'pnimis HaTeira Pnimis V'atzmus HaChachma. And the inner Teira is the inner and essence of wisdom. V'klolasin ha'yichudim shaychem rak ba'er pnimi. And the general unions, in other words, the spiritual unions, are shayach rak ba'er primi, are only capable in the internal energy. Yichud means two things are coming together. Where can that be possible? Only place where there's a distinction of levels. So you could say we're uniting those levels. V'zeu Roshei Train Yaakov v'Yosef. And this is the two Roshei Train. The two heads, Roshei Chachechem, Yaakov and Yosef. The Pirush HaMikdash Melech is there Teferes v'Yesod. The Mikdash Melech, as we said earlier, is Teferes and Yesod. The Hainu. After all these introductions, all these levels, he's tying it all together. I hope we can get this. Behind the Yaakov, who Hamshachas Ha'areh Kanal. Yaakov refers to the transmission of the reflection, not the essence. Amnam b'chinas Yosef. Yosef came out of the birth of Rachel, right? And Yaakov, but the higher one, Yosef comes under Etzem. Yosef is the primary dimension of Yisod. He transmits the essence of the divine and the internal of the divine, infinite light. And this is the meaning Ben Peres Yosef, Brod Yazgi Yosef. That's the Targum there. Ben Peres Yosef, Brod the Yazgi Yosef. What does this mean? Meaning, like, it's the son that Yazgi.
Yeah,
like right, that right, that it's a form of like, no, but it's more than just, it's like enhances also. He's one to say it's like an atzmizdika thing. Brod Ben Peres. Peres comes from the word like, wasn't just my son, my like Teferes son, my pride. So here Yazgi Yosef meaning Bro Yazgi, the Yazgi Yosef, the special son, like B'chinas Teisvaser, the additional, this is the level of that additional energy. Masha Teisvaser Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu Merubah Le'ikar. That the addition by God is more than the ikar, than the initial amount. This is Yosef refers to a level of intense abundance of energy in a gili and atzmi, revelation that is a fundamental, essential energy. All transmissions come through Yesod. No, but only that. This has two levels: hashpah chitzenis, hashpah primis, an outer transmission and an inner transmission. Ve'ikar b'chinas Yosef b'chinas hashpah primis, and the primary role of Yosef is the inner transmission, hashpah. Because the shaykh rak ba'er primi, all this is capable only to be stated by internal energy. She has by ma'alamata ribu yamiyut, which has higher and lower, a hierarchy of more and less. V'zeh the less reishel l'sira l'shimsha. This is the meaning that the moon does not have a root, a source, only its sun. The emes kenhu, the kol hashpos b'malchus b'chinas shemesh havaya b'chinas er primi. Because that's how it really is. That all the hashpos of malchus, sira, the moon, in malchus, all comes to shemesh from the er primi. But in this itself, there's two levels in the er primi. U'b'zeh beis mini chudim canal. But in this, there's two types of unions. V'zeh b'rosh ha'chadshechem. And this is the meaning of the B'rosh HaChadshechem plural. The B'chol Yarcha V'Yarcha, that every month, Nimshachim Beizeh Yechudim, we have a transmission of both unions. V'hem B'chinas Yaakov V'Yosef. The two unions, one of Yaakov, one of Yosef. The Yaakov B'chinas Ha'ara Leva, Yaakov is only a reflection. B'chinas Hashpah Chitzenis, the outer transmission. V'Yosef B'chinas Hashpah Primis V'Atzmis. And Yosef reflects the inner and essential transmission. This is the meaning of brod the Yazgi Yosef. Shanim sheb'chinas er atzmi begili b'chinas malchus. Brod the Yazgi Yosef, that it transmits an essential energy revealed in the level of malchus. Okay, this is very Kabbalistic, and there's a lot of technical language here. The question is, how is it relevant to what we discussed?
These two Yehudim somehow parallel to the
Eris and Kalim, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not so clear. Bottom line is, however, he's saying like this: the Malchus is the end of the spheres. It receives everything from the Shemesh. So the question, what if it's receiving only from one Rosh, what's two Roshim here? So he says the two Roshim refer to a Yichud Primi, Yichud Tzenis. Primi Satera, Tzenis Satera. I understand in the context of what he said several Mamorim back, where he speaks about Primi Tzenis Satera as the Mamutza in Atzilus of Eretz and Kalim, or within Eretz itself, two levels. But the bottom line is that all these different things, what he said was, first he said Musaf, that's Yisrael and Yaakov, Bikia, and Etzem and reflection. Then he goes to Edus and Teira, Edus and Nesuyin, Chetzenis Chachma, Primis HaChachma, Chetzenis HaTeira, 1 second, Primis HaTeira. All these are the same level. These are basically, it's not spelling it out, but it's almost most likely that it's exactly that. This is either Edus and Kalim, but basically that there are two levels. There are two levels in this structure.
How do you preface with two levels in Yaakov?
Hold on a second. One second. Yeah, most likely it's Eretz and Kalim. That's what I would think also. But listen, he spelled out what he spelled out. That's what it is. And
start learning about the Avos, Tisefus and Iker and Or. So that's probably the preface we're going to learn later. But I don't know. I was wondering why he started out with two levels in Yaakov. What did he preface here in his summary of the answering questions? What did he tell us about two levels in Yaakov to teach us about the different hashpah of Yaakov and Yosef?
Why not? I mean, because it helps understand this whole picture here. The Zohar says Rishon Train Yaakov and Yosef. The Migdash Melech says that's the Feres and Yesod, and everything comes through Yesod. He's saying so. There's two levels in this hashpah. And he brings from the Me'erer. I mean,
he could have gone directly from Yisrael to Yosef. It'd be Hamshacha Iker Pinimi to another Hamshacha Iker Pinimi. But instead he decides to go from the Chetzenis Hamshacha, which is only Ha'or, and then talk about
some of the. Because in Er Pinimi these are the two elements. There's an external union and an internal one.
But he had it at this level, and then he comes down to.
Where does it have it at this level? I don't see any higher level.
He says there's a difference between in the levels of the Yichud and the Yisrael.
And that's the difference between Yosef and Yaakov as well. Same thing. Same. That's the same. Those are the two same for sure. Yisrael and Yaakov, which is Musaf. Yisrael and Rachel rather, as opposed to Yaakov and Rachel.
Musaf and Shachar.
Musaf and Shachar is the two levels of this difference in Yaakov and Yosef. Look, Yosef is a product of Yaakov and Rachel and of Yisrael and Rachel. But here he's focusing, Yosef focuses more on the previous and atmos of it. Look, he doesn't really spell out, he just says that in Pnimi, he says it twice, that Pnimi Yechudim are only possible in Pnimi. And that has two levels. He doesn't spell it out, so fine, it's what it is. Let me do the Kitzur, Ube'emes, Ein Zerach Mitzad HaKli. And in truth, this structure, this hierarchy, is not just from the point of the containers, because you see in chapter 35, you could have interpreted that it's primarily the structure, because you say, the regal is larger, the torso is smaller, the head is the smallest. So it seems like the size of the containers determines how much energy flows into it. And here in this chapter, he made it clear that it's not the containers that determine it, it's the energy that determines it. There's also a measurement, a parameters in the energy. According to this, is the measurement of the containers. And then let's just finish this. The misavus ha'er nasa keli be'ifin shetekabla er. That from the thickness within the containers from the thickness within the energy comes the container, and according to that, the way it will receive the energy. In other words, basically saying that the reish gufa regel, the fact that this is the largest, this is the smallest, this is the medium, that itself came from the air that was measured that way. That's what he's adding here. Okay? Like it says in Etz Chaim, here he brings them together. The kav, the kav, the ray of light, is what causes the hierarchy. Over pardis. That is the spirit, it's the energy that creates sheer measurement to the whole structure. And both are true. In other words, both what he said in chapter 35, that it came from the containers or from the energy, both are true. The medidas hakel fi medidas air, because the parameters, the measurements of the measurement of the containers, according to the measurement of the energy. He's adding this. This is from the previous chapter. He didn't say this line. A higher air, the keli to that is a smaller keli. In other words, instead of saying that because the container is smaller, that's why the energy is greater, here he's saying, we spoke about this, which way it works, which one, where does it begin? Does it begin from the energy being greater or smaller, or is it from the container? So he's saying both are true, and it begins with energy, and then afterwards, according commensurate to the refinement of the container, is how the energy is drawn. And according to the above, we understand Rosh Hashanah. That he didn't sum up, so we have to do the figuring out. Okay, we did chapter 36, pages 6.